The woman of Canaan is an interesting character for a number of reasons. One is the rather bizarre and complicated history of the place that she comes from. Of course, she is called a woman of Canaan, but I can't emphasize enough, this is a geographical location. Sometimes it becomes a term used to describe people. There were Canaanites, people that lived in that land, the Holy Land, in the time of Abraham. Abraham had good relations with them. He had purchased part of the land to become a cemetery. There was a co-ownership. Those Canaanites of antiquity are no longer there, not really, by the time of the Exodus. The population of Philistines, moving in from the sea peoples, takes over the entire region. They kill off the men. They do intermarry with the women, so there's some of their DNA left. But there are not really any Canaanites by the time of the Exodus. Certainly not at the time of the first century. It's a generic term, like Philistia, which becomes Palestine, which becomes Palestine, which becomes whatever. So describing her as a Canaanite or a woman of Canaan doesn't really say a whole lot. Now she comes from the region of Tyre and Sidon, which are an important pair of cities near enough together, sharing enough in common economically and geographically and the needed resources to survive, that for most of their history, they were what we would call a dual monarchy. From an ancient era when cities all had rulers like Sodom and Gomorrah and Babylon and Uruk and Eridu, Tyre and Sidon had a king that ruled both Tyre and Sidon. They were a pair. They were the twin cities. And they have their own peculiar history that even though they are also occupied by Philistines by the time of the Exodus, they have the most moderate position vis-a-vis the creation of Israel. This is ancient Israel after the Exodus. They're friends with Saul. They become closer friends with David. They send all sorts of tribute and aid. There's a relationship between Israel and the people of Tyre and Sidon that is not hostile for most of their history. There's also the problem that this comes under the sway of the northern kingdom. When Israel in the north secedes from Judah in the south because they no longer will live under the reign of the house of David, it comes under the influence of the northern kingdom. Under their capital, it's Samaria, and the population ends up changing again. Now, all of this is relevant because whoever this woman is, whoever her ancestors are, they almost certainly are not Hebrews, not purely speaking, because of the intermarriage and the mixing together of the northern kingdom of Israel and also the deportation of their population and the importation of some new ones by the Assyrians. Samaria, or the Samaritans, get described by the first century as that amalgamation. Those people up there whose capital was once Samaria, who are now sort of Assyrians, sort of Hebrews, sort of the northern kingdom, sort of Philistines, and all blended together. They form a peculiar lot, all of these different histories as they come together, because by the time of the first century, the people up there in Samaria, the people around Tyre and Sidon, these people have become sort of proud of their Hebrew lineage, which is only microscopic, we might say. They believe in the coming of the Messiah. The Samaritan woman at the well who says that to Jesus, we know that the Messiah is coming. Although you Hebrews say that it's down here in Jerusalem where God must be worshipped, but we have our own temples and places in the north. They have a variation of the old religion, a sort of kind of copy, more faithful than their ancestors who created 2 golden calves to worship up there. Not nearly as naughty in a legalistic sense as the Pharisees are, but also kind of all over the place doctrinally. What exactly do they believe? They know that the Messiah is coming. They believe in the one God of Israel, but the details are really hazy. All of this is significant because of what happens in our actual text. This woman believes in Jesus. She believes, perhaps, that he is the Messiah, the Son of God, the descendant of David. but she comes with all of this baggage from these places that she's connected to by history and heritage. Of course, Jesus, as God, knows everything there is to know about this woman, but does she know what she needs to know about herself? And that's why the events play out the way they do. This is a good old-fashioned God putting your faith to the test. He's testing her, not because God is performing an experiment to find out what she believes, he already knows, but because she needs to go through the motions herself. Like Job so long before, who needed to learn the lesson of just how deep his faith was by going through that suffering and not renouncing God. This woman who has come seeking Jesus, who maybe made this decision quickly, who may have made this decision out of fear because her loved one is dying, because she's heard these stories. But what is her actual confession? What is her creed? What is it that she actually believes? Jesus confronts her with all the things he says because they're pretty typical Pharisaic stuff. He wants to see how she'll respond, or rather, wants her to see how she'll respond. Because what does a normal, ordinary human do? What do you do when confronted with that? When someone actually tells you, don't you know the law of God? You're not wanted here. Don't you know the law of God, that I have come for his people? He doesn't actually say, you're not one of them, but he does describe her as a dog. And it's perfectly rational and true. If you've worked hard to bring home the bacon, you don't hand it out to strangers until after you fed your family. Maybe you give some to them when you've got some left over. What he actually says to her isn't cruel, it's rational and moral. You don't take what belongs to the children and throw it to the dogs. He puts her in the position to be able to reject him, to be able to say, I don't want this. I don't like you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you're really the Son of God. I came here hedging my bets just in case you were, but you sound just like any other Pharisee. You just sound like another Jew that hates us Samaritans, and I want nothing to do with you. She needs to learn the depth of the faith that she is manifesting. She needs to learn. She needs to go through these motions. It needs to be expressed from her lips that she acknowledges that she is nothing in the presence of God Almighty. I have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed by what I have done and left undone. I am not worthy to come before you. I am not worthy to receive your baptism. I am not worthy to receive your body and blood. I am not worthy of you. I come before you as a poor, miserable piece of worm feces. A nice quote from Luther. She needs to go through that to know it, to say it, to express it, to realize it, to be in the presence of the Messiah who says, you stink, you're wretched, evil, and sinful, and you don't belong here. And she says, but even the dogs get the crumbs that fall from the Master's table. And this is essentially the miracle of Eucharist, that we, as dogs, as sinners, as the refuse and unclean things of the world, might be invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb in his kingdom. But because of his infinite mercy, not as dogs, not as beggars, but as kinfolk, as those called, invited, and filled with all sorts of blessing. All of this is there for the Canaanite woman. All of this is there for the woman of Tyre and Sidon. All of this is there for everyone, no matter where they have come from, if they accept the confession and creed. I am a sinner, and I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus allows her to discover and experience the depth of this for herself by rebuffing her, or at least seemingly rebuffing her the way that he does. He gives her real religion, by the way, because it is certainly true that you don't give away stuff that belongs to you and your kids. You feed and clothe them first. You serve your own first. Those people, those responsibilities that God has given you, you do that first. As a husband, as a wife, as a parent, as a citizen, as a whatever it is, that comes before things on the outside. But Jesus says it to her in such a way as to be offensive, because the spirit that is easily offended is the one that is blown around like a reed in the wind and is not faithful and is not pious. He's actually willing to tell her the harsh, real truth. You're a dog. You're an outsider. You don't deserve this. You're a wretched and miserable sinner. And no, you don't deserve it. And she says, no, I don't. But even dogs get the crumbs. He draws out of her the confession that she needs to make by preaching to her the truth. Not by saying to her, you're okay and I'm okay and the world's okay and everybody's okay just the way they are. Don't we all feel jolly and happy? He does not water it down or stifle it or change it, tweak the way that it should go, and he doesn't use her preferred pronouns. He says, you are a dog, you're an outsider, you don't have this coming, so that she can say, I'm a dog, I'm an outsider, and I don't have this coming. Through no merit or worthiness in me, I turn to you, believing that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God, the one whom even our ancestors rejected when they left the house of David, the ones that my Samaritan ancestors rejected, the truths that my ancestors in Tyre and Sidon rejected, and the murderous Philistines from which I come, but now before you as a woman made by God in his image, saying, Lord, I am not worthy to have you do this for me, but out of your mercy do it. And so it is done. This is essentially the gospel of Jesus Christ come into the world to die for the sins of the world and to take away our sin. By bringing the truth, living the truth, doing the truth, dying in truth, rising in truth, and infusing in us by baptismal regeneration, by his body and blood and all his works of grace, his truth, against all of the comfortable falsehoods of the world, the comfortable falsehoods of our flesh, the things that we would find easier, more enjoyable, more entertaining, whatever it is. Jesus comes with the hard, real, gritty, meat-hook realities of life and death to give us life out of his infinite love and mercy. In his name, amen.